Hello, everybody, and welcome to
Artist Wife,
And Writer Husband,
starring me, Anna Jefferson, aka Midnight.
and me,
Anna Jefferson
Anderson Richardson.
Anna Jefferson Richardson.
No relation. Yeah, but no, seriously, we are married.
Yeah.
And our guest, our returning guest, artist MDC. Not sure if y'all can hear that, but yeah, that was him. So today we're talking about racist ass Charlie Brown.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a strong opening. Okay. That's a very strong opening.
Yeah, I mean, last week Thanksgiving, right? You got I think
Week?
yeah, it was last week. Well, technically it's Sunday, so it was like the week before last. But you had people, right? Wednesday, I think they showed it. I totally miss it. The Thanksgiving special. So
Well, the kids watched it.
people pointed out that little Franklin, the only black character in the cast, I think, other than Pigpen, right? He black, right?
No.
He's not. Okay, that's just dirt.
To clarify, I know that in the cartoon there was another black character added, but that was like years later after the comic strip. Franklin was the first one.
He was the most prominent.
Yeah.
So someone pointed out, they did a screenshot, they pointed it out. Franklin is sitting on the left side of the table by himself. And a lot of people feel like that's racist. I wanted to bring this up mainly because, we're black and this is a black issue. And, last episode we was talking about Stan Lee, and he passed away. And a lot of people felt really emotional with that. And one thing I remember, the creator of the Peanuts, Charles Schultz, when he died, like, I remember as a kid, like, I was in a laundromat with my parents. A lot of people don't know, laundromat is like a place where poor people go and wash their clothes because we don't have a dryer or a washer inside our house. We didn't even have a house. We had an apartment, and the laundry room in the apartment, them junks stayed broken.
Like literally flooded with water. There was no hope. Just don't touch it.
So yeah, so we was at the laundromat. It was like probably nighttime or whatever, and Charles Schultz had died, and they were playing a special. And I remember, as a child, I cried like watching this because, I watched Peanuts. I grew up on it. I felt sad for this man dying. So best believe I felt a kind of way like, yo, Charles Schultz is racist. Damn. Like, I shed tears for this dude, and he's just a racist MFer.
Wasn't, but...
And my father ended up texting me, and he showed me the picture and whatnot. Like, this was after I already knew about it, and he was like, people are dumb. And I'm like, well, I don't feel like people are dumb. Like, I feel like you can feel a certain way about it. It's weird. And how do y'all feel when y'all found out about this?
Well, so, to tell you the truth, I guess I don't care enough about Peanuts to really look into the situation, to tell you the truth. The only thing I knew about Franklin was that, from what I heard, a black woman actually fought for there to be a black character on the show. She wrote the creator talking about the importance of representation way back in the day, and that's how he got on the show. Now, that being said, just because we got a black character doesn't entirely mean anything, especially considering if, he's on the opposite side of the Thanksgiving table alone. I never saw the episode. I don't know if there's a reason for that. I don't know if that screenshot is out of context. I have no idea. So, I'm indifferent, I guess.
See, my position's a little, like, weirder. Oh, actually, I'll let you go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I was done.
Yeah, my position's a little weirder because I did read that there was a time where, when he introduced the character, either he was forced to or that he wanted to, and his editors or whoever was in the newspapers was basically like, yeah, no, we're not trying to stir up controversy, just leave it be. But later on, he was. I do know that he was approached, and it was later on talked about, and he decided that it would be best to introduce a character, a black character. But he was one of those people that I don't think he did it because, unlike Stan Lee, who had this, he had little soapbox segments where he talked about racism and bigotry and misogyny. Charles Schultz, I don't think that he put Franklin in because he felt a particular a devotion towards representing a minority that needs it, so much as it was just like, probably a marketing strategy as well. Because I know that one of the other things that was mentioned was that it did boost him and his comic strips, and it continued to give him relevance over the couple of years, and not just with Franklin, but a lot with other topics. Is he brought up with Lucy, he was brought up with Daisy, right? What was Lionel's sister's name?
Lionel, his sister name was Sally. Sorry,
I don't know. Daisy. I probably Daisy Duck, just whatever. Yeah, I kind of do that where I just kind of cross sometimes, and they'll uncross later. But I didn't grow up. I mean, yes, I grew up with Peanuts. I traced the Peanuts. I drew Charlie Brown and Lucy, and I drew the gang or whatnot, and Snoopy and what the bird? Don't say it. I know the name. Starts with a W, I think. Woodstock. Thanks. That was totally cheap. Loved them. But I didn't know that he passed. I never knew when he passed. It was years later. It wasn't until Neff basically was like, yeah, this, that, the third, we started talking about it. I was like, oh dang, I didn't know he was dead, kind of thing. It's like, it wasn't in my sphere of awareness, and so like this subject is interesting to me, but I don't have enough knowledge further to feel particularly strong.
Another thing I want to point out, when your dad said people are dumb, he's not wrong, because when I think about it, it's like, okay, this was in the past, obviously, yet I don't know why people are making a deal out of it, considering that, well, Bugs Bunny and Betty Boop also started out kind of racist. Those cartoons had blackface, straight up blackface, in the worst possible way.
Like, you have actual scenes of Looney Tunes that had to be replaced, like actually had to be redrawn, reanimated, because without a doubt, it's racist.
Yeah, and that goes for Disney as well. Like, this isn't just Warner Brothers.
There's a lot of bad Japanese jokes on the old cartoons.
Oh, yeah, man. So like, and even that, like, going too much from the Peanuts. So yeah, Jamal's MDC, aka Jamal,
I am
is right. I'm looking from Stopes fact check. You're a racist, Charlie Brown. So that article, it did say that Schultz decided to add Franklin to the Peanuts gang after he began corresponding with Harriet Glickman, a retired school teacher from Los Angeles who was concerned about race relations in America, and wrote him in 1968, shortly after Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. And Stopes actually spoke to Glickman, who was 89 years old at the time, by phone from her Los Angeles area home. And yeah, she told him that this was like a pile up of everything going on. She just didn't thought like, hey, things are kind of bad, like maybe people need to see. No, this was like just a result from everything that had happened, including the assassination of MLK. So she wrote to him, and they showed the letter and everything, and he replied. He said he previously held off on introducing a black character, not because he was worried about meeting resistance to the concept, but because he wanted to avoid seeming to be patronizing. So Glickman told them that she wrote back to Schultz and asked him if it was okay with him to show his letter to some African American friends, and he said it was. So he received a letter from one of Glickman's friends, Kenneth C. Kelly, and basically he said that it wouldn't be an accusation of being patronizing. It would be a small price. The accusation of being patronizing would be a small price to pay for the positive results that would accrue. Because I mean, during this time, Peanuts was big. Like Miss Glickman, Miss Glickman said all her children had all types of Peanuts stuff. And it was a good cartoon and whatnot. You know, Christian values, all that stuff. It was one of the few cartoons that I probably would able to watch growing up. A lot of people don't know this, but during a time, like, my parents banned me from watching a lot of certain cartoons
and reading a lot of books.
Recess. I couldn't read Harry Potter and whatnot. I couldn't watch Pokemon. They didn't like the violence from it. They didn't like the darkness for Harry Potter about, you know, wizardry and witches and stuff like that. So I was banned from watching a lot of stuff, and that was very different for me because it didn't start off like that. Before, like, I remember watching Simpsons and whatnot with my mom. I used to love the little Halloween specials.
Oh yeah, the Treehouse
and whatnot. And but yeah, just to sum it up, you know, Schultz, he decided to add the black character, but a lot of people felt like it was kind of a cop out because all the characters prior to Franklin, they had their problems, they had their, you know, weaknesses, and Franklin was kind of that character that was on the outside, just being how weird everyone else was. But he himself kind of seemed like that perfect black kid, where you kind of get that with a lot of things today, where it's like, you know, they have the black character, but they don't want to go the route of having that black character be, you know, stereotypical, like, or, well, not even stereotypical, but like being the villain or being like overly angry and whatnot, because they don't want to offend black people. And that, as you can see with now, that's understandable and whatnot. Certain people do get offended by a lot of things. That kind of goes into another conversation that I wanted to have about this one indie creator, but there's so much to talk about.
Also, I want to point out, you know, let's not delve into the past about Franklin being across the table when all of us grew up watching Dragon Ball Z. Remember how black people looked in Dragon Ball Z the few times they were on there?
Dragon Ball Z. It was very... Yeah.
We're not even talking about Mr. Popo because, all right, if you want to even say that he was a black person.
A person.
But let's talk about the actual black people when they went to the cities.
Black characters in Dragon Ball, they had them lips and whatnot.
Yeah.
And I don't know what Toriyama said about that when questioned. That's definitely something we can look up and bring back in the next episode. But so, and this was very surprising to me, but just him adding Franklin was a big deal. A lot of people like clapped back at him, and some editors didn't want to publish his comic, like, because people didn't want to see a black kid interacting like
with white kids, like
in the
it
first.
Was very real in America at that time. That with the desegregation of schools, is it the desegregation when they basically black children were allowed to go to schools, or it was finally it was put into law that we were no longer segregate schools, and then it was still a very, very sour point for these white fathers and mothers to see their children even on a bus with a black kid, and then you're showing that in cartoons where their white children interact. It was just a giant controversy, and they hated every moment of it. And that was just so eking into cartoons or comic strips and things like that was a big deal. It was a big issue. Yeah. And they didn't want to see that. It ruined their perfect white fantasy, to be honest.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Like a lot of people, the first series of comic strips where Franklin was introduced, he and Lucy were never in the same strip. They were never inside the same panel, and whatnot. And that's very serious. So, at the sum of this, you can argue that Charles Schultz could have been racist. I feel like he wasn't racist because he did, when asked and was suggested to him, add Franklin. But at the same time, he was really reserved, and he could have took it further than what he allowed. Because I think at the same time, because Peanuts wasn't the only comic that she wrote to, and wasn't the only comic that she got a response to. There was another group that she wrote to, and they told her they agree, but they feel like it would hurt the comic and them making money, and they believed like the newspapers would drop them.
Yeah,
which was a very serious thing back then.
And one thing,
they were a product of their time. That was just what it was. Literally, the era that they lived in, they were subject to what was going on in that era, and you have to have the humane. You have to see the humane aspect of it. Yes, we can be in our social warrior mode 24/7, but in the end, we are humans, and just like these people with real life problems, I'm not saying that I'm saying, oh, but racists are humans too. It's like that's.
No, they're not humans. They should be destroyed.
But these people who did a thing, but they couldn't do everything you wanted them to do, when, yes, they did have the ability to do so, but they were also subject to, like, living in those times.
And especially back in those days, it really did require some baby steps back in the day. I'll tell you a good example. Speaking of comics, the writer or creator, don't quote me on that because I might have it off, but I believe the creator of the Tales from the Crypt comic books, or at least some of them, after the controversy with Tales from the Crypt, this might have been like in the 60s, there was this comic book called Judgment Day. It was a sci-fi book where this man goes to this planet, or this astronaut, however you want to put it, goes to this planet where it's run by robots. And when he goes there, he finds out that basically he's there to judge the robots on their progress. And when he finds out, he goes there and the robots are segregated. Like you have, I don't remember, I'm gonna just say silver and gold. I think the silver robots were discriminating against the gold ones. They were the subservient ones. And he was basically judging them harshly, like, yeah, y'all have not progressed. Y'all are, this is bad. And that was his judgment on him. And at the end of the story, he takes off his astronaut helmet and reveals that he is black. And the creator got a call from the publishers, or I don't know the technical terms for this or whatever. And it was like, we're not running this thing. You had to change it or you had to take it out. And he quote, and he basically, and I quote, am I allowed to say the F word?
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah. He basically said, fuck you, and hung up.
Dang.
Down.
I
was wondering because he was like in a quote, and I was like, okay, so you don't remember the title of the newspaper or whatever, but you remember his quote. So what was his quote? Oh, it was just that. Okay.
Yeah. And of course, and you have to remember, this guy has already gone through the trials of like the controversy that Tales from the Crypt got, because around that time, comic books were in general getting, whether it was Superman or whatever, all of them were under controversy because they were supposedly adding to the delinquents of children. And so he had already gone through all that. It's like, I don't remember if it was during the Civil Rights Movement or right before or even right after, but when him making that book was a huge move, because the whole thing was obviously a metaphor about racism. Right. And just to find out that, this could have easily have been a white character, but it wasn't. It was a black character.
And that is very important. The creator was...
The creator was white.
The creator was white.
Yeah.
And you have those people, you have the white people that, even today, where they're unapologetically, they're allies. They're allies. They're unapologetic in their allyship. They're unapologetic in, screw the fact that I'm a white guy and or a white woman. Like, you have that where it's like, I believe that this injustice is just, it's really effed up.
Yeah.
It's really fucked up.
Like,
that's the F word.
And with that, before we go into our next topic, so I think it's Night of the Living Dead.
Yes.
So I want to know, like, do you know why they decided to make the starring actor black?
Actually, that wasn't planned. He was just the best one for the role. Simply put, there was. Here's the funny thing about Night of the Living Dead. There was no purposeful metaphor of racism or anything. He just happened to be the best person for the role.
I actually enjoy when it's that narrative sometimes too.
Yeah, and this was funny because there's a scene in the movie where because Dwayne Jones is the actor, the black actor that plays the part.
Right.
He has some concerns. There's a scene in the movie, if you haven't seen it, where he smacks the main white woman, and he has some major concerns about. This is 1968.
Yeah.
He has some major freaking concerns about that. And George Romero was like, it'll be all right. You know, it's so
like
funny.
Easy for you to say, bro.
Yeah, it's like years later, George Romero said that he does, in fact, wish he had listened to more of those concerns. But I think it was a good thing that he did ignore it, because I think George Romero was looking beyond it. Because at the end of the day, the reason why Dwayne Jones in that movie is so significant is because he was just a man. You know, a lot of movies with black people around that time or after, the black people were either better or less than the white characters. You know, they were always either above, like more intellectual or whatever, or they were below. In this movie, he was just a man trying to deal with this crazy situation like everyone else.
Right.
And just like everyone else, he lost it sometimes. He didn't have it together. And it just goes to show you that, you know, he was a man, just a guy just trying to survive, plain and simple. And I don't, you know, if you haven't seen the movie, you know, you suck, because I'm gonna spoil this ending for you.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert.
Yeah. So at the end of the movie, you know, he's the only survivor, and there's guys that are going around, you know, killing all the zombies or whatever. They see him in the house, assuming he's a zombie, and just shoots him, and he dies. It was basically the Mist for 1968. So the thing about it, though, I kind of found out George Romero, when they had finished the movie and they were going around shopping around to show it, and while they were going around finding a theater to show it, that's when they found out Martin Luther King had been shot. And you know George Romero, he was a very progressive person anyway, you know, so that hit him hard. And you know, you have this movie about this black man, after all the struggle, ends up senselessly getting killed because he's a presumed threat. You know, wow. So
Damn.
that is one of the strongest representations in any movie.
Yeah, there was like the relevance of the Night of the Living Dead. I'm looking at an article.
Yeah.
To today's, you know, day era. It's like, it's stark. It's kind of terrifying, because, you know, we talk about how far we've come over the years with civil rights and you know, gaining things, and then, but you go back into media and you see things that are very much ever present. It's still very much relevant, these topics from 1968 to 2018.
Yeah.
It's like, it almost makes you feel a little bad, like nothing's changed. So, you know, things have as far as awareness, you know, but I mean, it's just like art. Many forms of art have a way of showing you that times, you know, we move slowly as humans. History can repeat itself, and sometimes it didn't seem like it changes at all.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of those people, you know, they're either still alive or their kids that they taught that those ways too are still alive. So it's like, it's always going to take a while for that type of segregation to end. So this actually, like, we tried to pre-write some of the stuff that we're going to talk about, but I think how this conversation, the road it turned is perfect, because this actually brings up a question that I want to ask of you, Anna Midnight, my wife. Do you mind sharing about the experience that you had with one of your commissions?
Sure. Which, like, the most recent one?
Yeah. I think it was earlier today, right?
It still like plagues me. Okay, so anybody who follows me, Midnight Designs, you'll know that I am an advocate for diversity, for representation, and a recent Facebook post that I had made, and it got a lot of shares. I was very surprised, but I'm also not surprised, because I follow people who follow me. They are like-minded, sort of. You know, I don't know. But one of the most recent posts this week or last week I had shared was like of my own thoughts. I said, dear Black creators, Latino, POC creators, Asian creators, you don't have to you don't have to put a white European whatever have you counterpart with your POC characters. It's all right to be unapologetically black, not apologetically, unapologetically black, POC, Latino, just under that person of color. If you want to have an entire full cast for your story, your creation, your world, and they're all of a person of color, they're all people of color, then do that. You don't have to, even when you're giving a pitch to a company or to a publisher or to whatever have you, you don't have to be like, oh, and this is their white friend, blah 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 blah. You don't. I get tired of seeing that. I see that all the time, especially when it comes to children's book, and they'll say this book is for little black kids, little black girls, little black boys, and then right next to them I'll see a white kid. You don't have to put them next to a white kid. You don't have to include them if you don't want to. That's like, you're free to not have to do that. I think that's one of the most beautiful things about creating, is that it's your creation. As long as you're, I don't know. I don't have restrictions on creativity. I have my own moral codes that I go by, but that's personally for me. That's within my realm. But with my client recently, communication is key, guys. And I say that a lot to myself. Me and my husband, we say it a lot to each other. I need to say it to my client as well. My client, I was talking to her, and for her character, I'd asked for some information, and I wasn't clear enough at what I asked. And for some reason, I was very hesitant on asking what is the race or the ethnicity of the character. I'm not normally shy or scared of doing this, even with someone I don't know on a personal level. It's just that for me, I felt like my excuse was, in today's society, it's not polite to go up to someone and be like, hey, you look pretty. What are you, Hispanic? Or like, oh, what's your race? Yes, I have had people yell that at me.
Hey, Ma, you look exotic. What are you?
Yeah, like, oh, are you Middle Eastern? I'm just like...
Somebody called me exotic once.
Once?
I had someone come up to me like...
I've literally had people question
Wait,
me.
yeah. So, explain that.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, one time I was saying, someone was like, Jamal is very exotic looking. And I was like, huh, who said that? Yeah, I'm not going to say no names, but let's just say they're not very far from the mic.
Oh,
you guys are embarrassing.
okay, so...
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yo, I was like mega thirsty, and I was trying to move back from the mic. I am so sorry. I was trying.
Yeah, and you was crushing the bottle.
I was trying. I am so sorry. It was just like,
Jeez.
like
I want them to know that I am thirsty.
Mode. No, I wasn't survival. I'm so goddamn thirsty. I'm so sorry. But
I remember one time during my day job. Well, it was overnight job. I was just like sitting there, and this like drunk person had. I was sitting outside. I think like the garage to the building was broken or whatever, so they had us posted outside. And this person that just came from the club or whatever, he walked up to me and he was like, "Hey," I was like, "Hey." He was like, "What are you? Are you like Ethiopian?" And I'm just like, "No, I'm black."
That's not rare though, because going to our apartment one time, this one guy called out, and my sister, we're half black, half Mexican. And my
that was funny. He was walking up to the
really
apartment.
Mexican.
Yeah,
and so we're
my sister-in-law
yeah.
looks Mexican, but she's like as Anna was saying, half black, half Mexican. Yeah, and the guy looked at me, and then he looked at my daughter, and then he looked at my sister-in-law, and he was like, "Are you?" He asked my sister-in-law, "Are you guys Colombian?"
So what would she say? We're from Maryland.
Yeah.
He thought he was asking, "Are you from DC?"
Oh man.
She's still near
precious.
the car. Yeah,
she's precious.
Poor child. She's going to college next year, so hopefully. But
yeah. Continue with your story.
In those instances, it's hella awkward. To be the subject of like, hey, what's, and I think that generally being curious about someone's race when you can't immediately tell it, and instead of assuming, asking, I don't mind you asking.
I just feel like there's a right way to ask.
Yeah, and it still ends up being an awkward conversation sometimes. Depending on who, how, it's just, like you said, it's a way to ask it. And that feeling sunk into me as I was literally talking to my client mobily text message, mobile was weird, but text message about her fictional character. I instantly locked up and I felt awkward and shy about asking her, hey, what's the race of this character I'm literally about to draw? And so I asked her, color was he? That didn't make any sense. She just told me what color he wears. And that's pretty much what I could have. And I was too shy, or I was too embarrassed, I was too nervous to pressure her further. So instead, I did the one thing I would never, ever, ever tell an artist that's doing a paid commission to do. Never assume. It's all right to, if they give you artistic liberties, to play with ideas that they've given you, especially if they want to. But I don't think it's ever good to, when you're doing something pretty important, assume that you know what your client wants. And so I did it without meaning to, like, I'm just going to assume. I didn't think that. I had asked. I had gotten an answer. I didn't want to because I was too shy to ask again. So instead, I got he's regal. He wears royal clothes. He's a prince in a high black tower. He's European. And so I drew him European. I made him pale. I made him white. I didn't even think twice about it. Like, I've worked with so many other people where literally their characters are white, or white and Asian, or white and black, or white and Mexican, or brown and then half white, half black. It's so often that I've worked with people who've created that and they've asked me for that. Or it's always been some kind of like just white involved. And, you know, I'm starting to feel it. It gets under my skin a bit. So when it got under my skin so much that I just assumed that this prince character was European. And I hated that so much. It's a fantasy world. It's medieval. So I feel like no, there's no justifying. I should have talked to her. And I apologized later on. I expressed it to her. I showed her the picture and she was like, I never imagined my character's pale. And she said, he's actually tan brown. I was like, I don't want to smack my face, but that's what I did. I literally smacked my face. I felt ashamed. I felt bad because as someone who represents diversity, it was like a really big, it was me stabbing myself in the heart over things that I care about because I automatically assumed that she wanted a white character as a black creator. And I felt bad. And she understood. I explained, gave her the character. I fixed the character. It was easy just to change the hue and desaturation. But I'm still kind of like beating myself up over it. And my hubby told me not to, but I'm still kind of doing it because I hate that that's so ingrained in me. That royalty equals white. Hate it, hate it, hate it. Because it doesn't. That's what, I don't know.
You know, when you said you assumed, I want to point out, this is to me, this is one of the most perfect examples of what Anna was just saying about how things are ingrained in her. Like, no one cared about this darn movie, but World Trade Center movie with Nicolas Cage, you know, it wasn't a good movie. I don't plan to watch it. Yeah, I know it's bad for me to assume, but just I'm right. So, anyway, there's a character that's in the movie. I read about this. He's a fireman. He was off-duty. Now, here's the thing. In real life, he was an off-duty fireman. No, he was off-duty. I think he was a serviceman. I think he was a soldier that volunteered to rescue and help people during 9/11. Now, in the movie, he's played by a white guy. Now the people who, you know, researched for this movie or whatever, you know, they just came across his name and they cast as a white guy. In fact, in real life, this was actually a black guy. And their whole excuse was, oh, well, we never actually, you know, looked him up to really see what he looked like. I'm like, but y'all assumed that he was white.
Yeah.
So basically, I mean, now given no one really cared about this movie, but let's just think about the fact that, you know, a black hero who risked his life on, like, you know, 9/11 of all days, missed out on getting credit because someone just, instead of doing research, assumed he was white because, you know, white is the default of everything. You know, white is always the default. And this is another reason why I stress the importance of doing research, even with total fantasy and fiction. You know, I almost never shut up about ancient Africa. I've been studying it for over a decade. And it's like, you know, especially when you're doing fantasy with characters of color. It's like, why even base it on European culture? It's like, add some African culture, add some Mexican culture. Everyone has an ancient medieval time period. Everyone has royalty. Everyone has a story. It's like, and the thing about, let me tell you, this brought me back. One of the most offensive things I ever saw in my life, and it offended me after the fact because I didn't know better. But years ago, like way back, when the movie Underworld was still relevant and good, there was
that.
Just dated us.
Yeah, there was comic books for it, and I remember on one of the covers it showed, if you've seen the movie, you remember the Lycans. It was Lucian, the leader, and then it was Ray's his like right hand man. Ray's was black, also the writer or co-writer of Underworld, by the way.
I never knew that.
Yeah, Kevin Grievous. He's from DC. He used to be a bouncer, and he's also a chemist.
Oh wow.
Yeah, he incorporated that in his script. Yeah, he's kind of underrated actually. But anyway, on the comic cover, it was in medieval times, so Lucian is there in medieval clothing with a sword, and raises next to him with a grass skirt and a stone spear. Now, at the time, I didn't think much of it. I thought that was really cool. But once I started studying ancient Africa or researching ancient Africa, I realized by the clothes Lucian had, which are dead on medieval, Africans had already long had iron. In fact, they had iron before a lot of Europeans did. So that drawing or that cover was so inaccurate because no one did research, and you wonder, okay, how did I find out about this? How did I find out about Africa? It's like, well, because somebody once told me when we were discussing Blade, he was like, I don't know, he was like, to me a black guy doesn't look right with a sword. And so when I
Triggered.
oh yeah,
I've had.
when I looked up ancient African weapons, we had plenty of swords.
Yeah.
Plenty of swords. Yaka, Ilwoon, I can name a few.
Yeah.
And yes, they were iron, they were copper. Africa never had a bronze age. It went straight from stone to iron age before Europe in a lot of places. So, in reading all this, I was like, dear God, someone just assumed that we were still in the Stone Age because that's what we were all taught, that Africa was a jungle with naked people and primitive people. No one ever thought that we had castles, which we do.
Yes.
We had armor in some cases.
Still have
Yes.
royalty.
There's royalty.
To this day.
There was communication around the world. Kenya was trading with China in medieval times. There's just, I could go on all night about this, to be honest. But the long story short, do your research, plain and simple.
Can
just
I say,
look.
to add to that, it wasn't. What was it? 2000. It was just last year. It was just last year. No. It was this year. I literally two artists. They draw. They're black creators. I don't like either one of them. But that's besides the point. I especially don't like one of them. But besides the point, they're black male creators. They create black characters. They talk about diversity. One of them talks about diversity. Anyway, basically, one had made a post, and I think it was because someone had a bow staff, and they had basically brought the same thing, that black Africans didn't have swords. That was literally.
You did tell me about that.
I showed it to Anderson. It was so embarrassing to read all these black creators, the other black people co-signing, saying that I literally have talked to these people. They've seen my drawings. They know I know Jamal. In fact, I think one of them even knows Jamal or knew Jamal. And it's like, it made me so upset that today they're like, no. It was talking about black people with katanas, and someone had said that I'm getting tired of seeing black people with katanas. And it's like, yeah, basically on the lines of like black people Africans didn't have swords. And I so bad wanted to go into the comment and just spam pictures of them. I'm just like,
people.
Jamal's educated me, but I educated myself. They could educate themselves.
Africans have swords, and that's actually a pet peeve of mine, though. Like, I do agree with that person. I'm really tired of seeing Africans with katanas,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Africans with claymores.
Yeah.
I'm like,
It's like an erasure of some sort, as if to say they don't have.
like
their own.
we have our own swords, we have our own fighting styles, like just like
plenty.
like there's so much history to Africa, so many countries that you can pull from it, like
They have their own gods.
And let
multiple,
me
not
tell
just
you
the
something.
Orishas.
Let me tell you
So many.
something. All it is a Google click. That's the thing about this that gets me. It's like I
Yes.
just literally just looked up. I don't even think I looked up African swords. I think I just looked up African weapons and I saw
Dude,
swords.
this guy has a post. You were doing first in MySpace, just posting a bunch of pictures of this stuff. He has a file compiled. He had pictures printed out
And-
before Google became like the mass database that it
and
was.
if you don't believe us, like, I'm
We
gonna
will post
have
this.
MDC, please give a shout out to your friend on YouTube.
Oh yeah, Damon Stith is he's a practitioner of ancient African war styles and fighting styles. He's actually been on the show on El Rey called Men at Arms. He's been on there a couple of times showcasing his weapons. I actually met this guy through my research, as a matter of fact. I came across his videos because he's made wood duplicates of a lot of weapons, and he practices the styles, does a lot of research with. Yep, and that's something else I've done as well. And I befriended him on Facebook, and I'm glad to see that he's really getting out there. Like when I saw him on El Rey, I was like, oh my god, I know that guy. It's the best feeling. And but this just goes to show you that, now I was telling this couple here about how I went on a rampage this week on social media. I don't know, I was just feeling myself that day. I was in a Killmonger mood. Like I was just going that turn on any like problematic thing I saw. And it was crazy how ignorant people are, because all it takes is a Google click.
It really
like
does.
whether it's fact checking or just finding out something. Like this is not
Be
something.
your best friend.
And trust me, you do have to dig for African history because it has been destroyed and buried and overlooked. So trust me, it's this decade worth of research. I still don't feel like I know enough to write a book on it. I really don't.
It feels great when you
know?
do find these pieces, like those tribe of women I added to your page.
Yes.
Yeah, that actually take the dresses of their of the colonizers that tried to came. They take it and they wear it as part of their culture, but to say that they survived,
Yeah.
because they were almost wiped out.
Mm-hmm.
And when I get the names of it, I'll bring it up. But
So people who are interested in seeing that with the African weapons, that's Damon Stith, DA apostrophe MONSTITH. If this gets posted on YouTube, we're gonna definitely leak to his channel and whatnot, or show his name so y'all can type it in. But yeah. So, but all this brings me to my question, right? Has creators, Anna, you have your stories. Jamal, you have your stories. Do you guys honestly feel compelled to add white people to your cast?
Bluntly put, I'm sick of white people. And I'm saying this, and when I say this, I mean, no, it's nothing against white people, but here's the fact about it. They are in everything, okay? They own Hollywood. They own everything. There is no obligation whatsoever to represent them in anything. There's just no reason. Now, I will say, me personally, I'm really big on diversity. I really feel like everybody should be in the story. So, of course, I'm going to have white people in it in most cases. But I think also the first thing you must ask yourself when you're writing a story is how much first off, how realistic is your story? Is it based in reality? Is it based in a certain time period? Is it based in a certain place? If so, you need to do your research about how much race plays a part in these things. Because let me tell you, like, for years in cinema, every time you saw a movie with Romans, everybody was right. Everybody was white. I'm sorry, but when you, when you get to, I would say maybe maybe the 90s, but definitely whenever Gladiator came out, I don't remember. you start to see a bit more diverse mix up because by then researchers were more familiar with the fact that, oh no, Rome had a lot of different ethnicities there. Africans, Asians, especially when you watch the show Spartacus, you have a lot of different races there. And that's why it's important to do your research, because you might assume, oh, it's in Europe, it must be all white, or it's in Africa, it must be all black. That's not true. Africa, Europe and Asia were in a lot of contact with each other throughout the centuries in ancient times. And, you know, and even
Africa is so freaking large. It really baffles me that people wouldn't think that. I mean, even in like you know, we keep bringing up the medieval times. You'll see King Arthur, and a lot of people will have his court, his at the round table, be all white. But there was, like, you know, stories and records that know there was different ethnicities even with his top man. Like, I think it spoke of one warrior that had a curved sword.
Right.
So a lot of people, you can probably think that's what is it, a scimitar, or you know, something like that. I mean, it's
or
like,
Shimshir. I think that's their proper name, but yeah, scimitar, Shimshir, something like that.
okay. So you have, like, especially when you have these large port cities and whatnot,
Yes.
that they're trading with other people. They're not just trading within themselves. Like, they trading for, like, whether it's
Around
like,
the world.
you know, supplies that they can't grow in their area or their climate.
Think
and
about it.
whatnot. There was black people. There were mulattoes existed back then, for
And
crying out
Europeans
loud.
weren't the only one with boats. That's
Listen,
the biggest, most important thing.
Rome got their silk from China. Ancient Rome got silk from China. Kenya gave a giraffe to China. Let me tell you something. Look up Saint Maurice. Saint Maurice was a black. Well, he is thought to be a black legionnaire, because a Roman legionnaire, because of his name, Maurice. That's, you know, generally a black name, and he apparently had an entire regiment of black legionnaires. Now, the reason he's a saint is because he's also a martyr, because this is like post-Christian. Well, this is the time Christians began to appear in Rome. I don't know this full story. Long story short, he was supposed to execute Christians, and being a Christian, he wrote back to the emperor saying, we cannot execute our own, and him and his entire army was basically put to death for that, you know. So think about this. This is a black legionnaire. He's a general in the Roman legion, black guy, right? And yeah, and then just think about, even with Native America, it's like the Vikings made their way to America in 10,000 AD.
Yeah.
You know,
They came
and
to Canada, they came down,
And then
and
they got
then they left.
right.
but the one thing about it, before they got wrecked, there's a good chance that there was some trading going on, because it's
Yes.
been theorized that the skinwalkers in Native American lore came from the Viking berserkers. That's something that can only really happen if they were in some sense communicating.
See, I thought you were gonna mention the whole fact that they left with grapes. Like, there was something that wasn't like grown over there. It was American grown. And like there was this one. This was actually a bit years later. I think he was like Norwegian Dutch. He was along that smaller region. Came around through like Canada, interacted with the natives there, and then literally he was like, "Oh crap, yo, they sell these like little bowls of sweet fruit things. These are the best. I'm gonna take these home to my wife." And that was like, and he came back and visited. They holiday there and left again with some more grapes. There was
Another fun fact.
there literally was no mention of a massacre or anything like that. He just came for some grapes. That's all he wanted.
Vikings and Muslims were allies at one point. Let that think about that for a minute.
Nah,
You know,
that's interesting.
you know. So and that's the thing. People have this thing that everyone stayed in their own place and were happy back in ancient time. That's a lie.
so stupid.
But see, this is the reason you research different time periods. You'd be surprised where, you know, different people were in different time periods. Now that's just talking about, you know, if you're depicting something realistically. But when it comes to fantasy, like, you have to think about, like, I always say with sci-fi that stories that take place in the far future, I'm like, there's literally no reason we should have an overwhelming white cast in a futuristic movie.
Yeah, that just
There's
makes no sense.
literally no freaking reason. That right there to me is a negative message in and of itself. When it comes to fantasy, it's a bit more complex because it's like, if you take Lord of the Rings, for instance, that's distinct European lore, so it's understandable. Just like you have, you know,
even
Chinese
with Lord of the Rings,
fantasy.
didn't they have Asians? They had Eastern nations that came over at one point, right?
Yeah, they like briefly in the last story.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know? So
With the elephants.
even though with Game of Thrones, as much as I love that show, there's things I would heavily criticize, considering that the prominent black guy is a unit. But, you know, I'm not gonna, you know.
No, the part when Daenerys, if I said her name right, sorry, the part where Daenerys is literally getting carried on the wave of these brown people and it's worshiping the white goddess. I was like, and I'm checking out on this part.
You know, if I could have.
Checking out.
Oh, that was so cringe. And it's crazy to me that no one thought that'd be a little,
Yeah,
you know.
that's the part that I don't understand. You saw this. You're reviewing this. You're making this. You see that, right? I know you see that. Somebody. There's not just one person on these teams either. It's not just one guy, right? Or girl. It's like a team of the production crew.
Yeah, oh yeah, of course.
So I'm
and
like, y'all
you
see
know,
that, right?
Assassin's Creed does diversity better than Game of Thrones.
Oh,
I'm just gonna say that. You know, I'm not really an Assassin's Creed fan. It's just something I do appreciate about them, because I think the only one I bought was the third one. I think at the beginning, early on, it says that Assassin's Creed was developed by people of different creeds, races, religions, etc., etc. I thought, and you see it in the game, like the characters Native American. You had the game with the pirates. You had that one spin-off game with the black character.
Yeah, the first character was he was Middle Eastern. The first guy, he was descendant of, and it was like this prominent thing. It was literally them killing the Catholics or the Christians or what are they called?
The Knights Templar.
Yeah, the Templars. And people, I don't know if anyone batted an eye. I can tell you that everyone I was playing, we didn't bat an eye. But everyone I knew, black, and it was just like, yeah, this is cool, like I understand completely. These Templars suck, and it's like, I feel like, I don't know, diversity in video games have gotten better, but then they also have a problem when Hollywood sticks their foot in things.
Yeah, but it's funny.
Money becomes...
Because video games, if you ask me, they're actually behind Hollywood. They're getting there, because we got 2 games where you can kill clan members.
Yeah,
Mafia 3 and Red Dead Redemption 2.
Red Dead Redemption 2.
Thank God for Rockstar, man. I gotta tell you.
Yeah, they're not.
They do not play around, and I love them for it.
Did Rockstar did they do GTA?
Yes.
Yeah.
They did GTA.
Their character creations has always been, and we talked about this last time, but I meant to bring it up. Their character creations in GTA, they're not racist. They're very thorough. Like, you want to create a black character, your character's gonna look black. You want to create a Hispanic character,
it's not very stereotypical. But I mean, that's also like where Rockstar is stationed. It's an American,
right?
It's an American company. So that definitely has a lot to do with that, I feel like.
Yeah. I didn't answer the question.
But yeah. To bring it back around to projects and whatnot, do you feel like you're obligated to include white characters in your creations?
See, and that's where I go ahead and say no. I have never felt obligated in all of my stories. I haven't included. Sorry, I said that loudly. I haven't included a white person. And most of my stories are based on my friends. Most of my characters are based on my friends. Literally, when I first started creating stories, they've all been my family, all 6 of them. Sometimes just 4 or 5, because the little ones were babies. But even then, they were in my stories. And our friends. And I grew up in, I was born in California. I grew up in the Hispanic part of Sunnyvale, near Sacramento, I guess. It's pretty close to Sacramento, San Diego, one of that part, whatever. And I grew up in a Hispanic neighborhood. Up until I was 6 or 7, I only spoke Spanish, so, but even when I moved to Texas, Hispanic people, I met my first black, to be honest. Even though my dad was black, I never registered him as black. Or I never really said, like, hey, my dad's black. I was a kid. But I had my first black friends, and I heard the N-word for the first time. And I was like, Pikachu meme insert, like, oh. And I included them in my stories. Cool. I have some black friends I can put in my own stories. We wrote stories together. We sat down and created these. And I wasn't yet aware of being half black. But I still didn't. I had one white friend, and I gave him a part of my story. And to be honest, he was our good friend of our group, but he was kind of like, he was a token white guy, so he got a lot of jokes made at him. He also liked to say he's not really white, he's Irish, and it's just like, that was also the joke thing too about the whole fact that at one point the Irish are considered white, and you know.
Yeah, they were considered lesser.
Yeah.
Lesser.
Same with the Jews. Same with the
Italians.
yeah, just it goes down the line.
It's like, well, when did Jews actually officially became
I don't think
white?
even
Because I still
still,
don't think they're considered white.
there's still
like
anti-Semitic jokes.
Yeah, nationalists don't fuck with them.
Yeah, it's still just see, and this is funny. This goes back to that ignorant, that argument.
Would it be the
got in-
nationalists or no? The supremists don't fuck with them.
And
Well,
the
nationalist supreme same thing.
Yeah,
Okay,
they have the same-
He's just screw
They
him.
all scream, "No, Jews will not replace us," instead of saying, "You will not replace us."
Yeah, they just mad because they don't work hard.
Lame ass. Right. And it's like, I don't know why Europeans have this thing of like creating a divide. I mean, I can only say this from my own. I call them European, but it's white. My experience in America is a lot of white people that I have met, they make a divide. Even my white friend from Texas was like, "Oh, I'm not white, I'm Irish." So he wanted to divide himself from white people. I not knowing any
Well,
white people.
this is one thing I have learned. There are, so I've talked to probably a handful of people from England, and well, first of all, I heard this from a black woman from England. As a matter of fact, over there she's not a black woman; she's just English, you know.
Yeah.
But but she was talking about, she was like, the white people in England do not like the white people in America. Like, it's such a, because over here racism is just so freaking ingrained.
Yeah.
Like, I remember this woman I know from England at one of the clubs I go to was talking about how when she came over from England, she moved to I think either Maryland or Virginia. She was on the countryside. She was like, everywhere she saw Confederate flags, and she was so freaking confused.
Yeah, I would.
Like, she was just like, why is everyone flying Confederate flags? She know her history, so she's a little, come to America, that kind of confused her. Like, why is this a thing here? And
Just as confused as the rest of us.
you do have white, I mean, you got people in every race that doesn't associate, and you got some white people that say they're not white, they're Irish, or they're not, because they're trying to separate from that sort of, they associate being called a white person with a certain thing.
Yeah.
And just like black people associate being called a black person with a certain thing. They got to be Pan-African, or they got to be Dominican, or African-American, or,
And that's a subject I do want to bring up a bit later.
It's kind of like when you think of dumb American, the first thing that comes into view isn't an African American or a Chinese American. It's a white American.
Yeah.
You think of redneck.
Yeah, redneck. Yeah.
Trailer.
Yeah.
Trailer trash.
I wasn't gonna say all that dang, but like,
but we finish each other's sentences.
we should let me set the sandwich part down.
But yeah. So for me as a writer,
Wait, I wasn't done. What?
okay, like that was literally like five
Okay, all right, sorry. Go ahead.
minutes of you diverting from your own self. So
I apologize. All right.
how do you feel?
Yeah. Okay. So I guess I'll get to tell a whole third story. I don't feel like I've never felt obligated. I've come from a world where the minority was white people. So when I found out, hey, you're the minority, I'm just like, how? There's like 100,000, there's 1 million in this community that's like black. Like, I met like 1 or 2 white people in school. And yes, they have brought up the debate that they're the majority and we're the minority. And to my mind, like, it took me a while to understand exactly on what scale they mean. But for my stories, I never felt like I wanted to create a world where something like that existed. Where, oh, you're brown, you're minority, we're white, we're majority. I hated that idea. I wanted to create a world that meshed together. So as my stories developed, even with the story that dates back to, that's completely fantasy. It's not even on Earth. I like to go back to the idea that what color is nature around us. So if I was going to create a character, I would create them based on what's around them, how they develop their regionally, how they adapted to the type of situation they're in. And even for ones that are loosely based off on Earth, even still, I have throughout history, you'll see that a lot of the paintings, a lot of portraits, a lot of relics, a lot of statues, they're not made out of, like, they're not really made out, like, not every single one is made out of marble. There are those from the Renaissance era, and, you know, the region of, that region, the what they call the Caucasus region, which is where Caucasian came from. Basically, like, the Roman, Italian, like, the upper Mediterranean part. You'll find some along those lines where the Europeans, the Romans, the Grecians, however, in that section, they created using marble. But everywhere else, they were using different mediums, different types of clay, different types of stone, different types of things, and they chose the one that best reflected themselves, their skin colors. And I find that such a ridiculous debate that you see these gods on the wall. You see the Egyptian gods, you see the Aztec gods, you see these Chinese gods, you see these Filipino gods, gods. See these African gods. You see them literally use the color of like black or of stone of these darker shades, and you're like, oh, that's a white god. That's in correlation to this white god. Like, where? They used red. They used yellow. They used brown. They used black. They used these dark tones. They used stone, and they weren't using the lightest complexion. No, their gods look like them. Their stories tell stories of people like them. Their culture. I did want to go to real quick, and then I'll let you go to you. I did want to say, those people that don't do the little bit of research it takes to figure out. My daughter was watching Netflix Princess Switch, and it has Vanessa Hudgens. I did not know it was Vanessa Hudgens. I just saw an ambiguous POC girl as a princess with a European accent, as a princess from British royalty, and her sister was American. Vanessa Hudgens is a mix of like Native American, Hispanic, and Filipino, I believe. She's not European, and there might be maybe a mix somewhere in there, but she's not European. You could have totally, like, Europeans aren't the only ones that have royalty. Not like I was just complaining about it earlier.
Like you're saying she never lived in Europe?
Like, no, she's American. She's from California.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I got you.
Yeah, but she was playing a princess for the Netflix special from Europe, and it's like, oh, she had a British accent, and it sounded, I knew it sounded fake. I've heard real British accents before. I've had communications with actual people with British accents. Hers sounded kind of fake. Not anything on her as an actress, but why couldn't she be of African royalty? I mean, you know what? Hispanic royalty. Yes, a lot of Central America has been destabilized from like many, like just the hands in the pot situation. Too many people in the kitchen. But that doesn't mean that there are like the lineages are entirely dead. There are still Spanish royalty. There's still Chinese royalty. Literally, our president is like head over heels with the Chinese emperor. He's an emperor. He still exists. The Japanese, they have an empress, and they have an emperor too, you know, but they have these royalties still exist around the world. It's not just Europe that has them. And I'm getting tired of seeing that.
I agree with that. But how do you know it's not a case of like with Night of the Living Dead, where she was just the best actress for the role?
And you know, and if that's the case, totally kudos. I thought that she was a fine actor besides the kind of fake accent. My big stint, it was obviously a fake accent. She's not British, but I could tell it was. If she was just picked for the role, that's fine. I get tired of white people. Basically, what Joel said. I get tired of white people. I get tired of Europeans.
This is what I'm gonna say. Like two examples I want to bring up, and I feel like one of these might be a subject for another day. First things first, when Scarlett Johansson was in Ghost in the Shell,
that was really
and now first there's two things I want to point out about that. Like, I remember some people pointed out that the fact that Japan had no problem with this. And I'm thinking that's because they run their own darn media, and they're not gonna freak out about white Americans trying to be them.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, whatever company that Hollywood had to pay for the licensing, they got paid.
Yeah.
And whatever. They got paid for the licensing, whatever agreement, if they was to make whatever the film makes, you know, they got their money.
Japan is good. They got anime.
Yeah,
All right,
they're
they're
nice
ruling the world with
representation.
anime, and they got their own movies and everything. They're good.
Yeah,
You know,
their CGI
for
is actually-
Asians Americans, that was a problem. For POC Americans, that was a problem. It's like, why did she have to be Scarlett Johansson? It could have been an Hispanic character, a black character, Native American. Could have been anything. She's a robot. Why she got to be white?
Yeah, the other thing was.
No, how about that? Y'all colonizing robots too. You know, but another example of this, let me tell you, this is always. I always had major mixed feelings about this because on one hand I thought it was kind of really ironic, almost in a penis envy kind of way, but at the same time it also kind of bugs me when you have video game characters in particular, but even I guess animated characters voiced by characters of POC, but the characters themselves are usually white.
I.e.
You
Kratos,
know.
played by Christopher. I forget his last name. Shoot.
Yeah,
Well, actually, he said and then the other way around, or where you have POC characters, but they're voiced by white people.
Yeah, and I feel like we'll probably go more in depth in that in a different episode because
Yeah,
there's
definitely.
so much that can be said about that going all kinds of ways. So I'm not
Yeah.
going to say too much on
I
that.
didn't really want to bring up the whole thing of whitewashing in this episode.
Oh, that's definitely a subject though.
Yeah, that's a like a larger subject, and we're already at the hour mark.
Oops.
But yeah. For me, I feel like it's different. I feel like I have to include white people. Like representation, I feel like all across the board matters and whatnot. And I think that I might not be the only creator that feels that way, especially when you look at white people are the majority race in this country.
Are they?
And
I'm still questioning that too.
well, as far as they report.
As they
Yeah,
report, right?
So with that being said,
Hispanics are real MVPs. Just saying.
I want to in my stories I want to bring in a lot of people. I want to bring in a lot of people from different cultures. I mean, because I feel like people look at, well, when I branch out, my success becomes greater. You look at people like Jay-Z. You look at people like Beyonce. You look at people like Bruno Mars. You know, Bruno Mars doesn't just appeal to the people of his race. Same for Jay-Z and Beyonce. They have such a broad
Yeah, they become a universal icon.
audience. Yeah, white people love them, black people love them, Hispanic people love them,
Asians dance to
Asians, everyone
Beyonce, K-pop,
love that.
Prince of David
And-
Bowie.
and
Yeah.
with me and with my creations, I kind of want that same appeal and whatnot. And not saying that I can't get that appeal with being unapologetically black, because one thing that I found out, a lot of white people white blackish. More black people more white people white blackish than black people.
I don't watch
Which
Black
you
Mirror.
might
I don't-
want
I
to
don't-
question, but okay.
Yeah, it's like, are y'all learning something from this?
But I mean, but that's kind of weird, and that kind of brings into like so many things where it's like, okay, if I do this, like who am I doing it for? I want to do my stories for black people, but is black people going to read it? Is black people going to watch the stuff that I do, or that, you know?
Or will everybody?
Or should I just go for the bigger part? And it brings up so many questions
Yeah.
and whatnot, and this is why I wanted to talk about this, because it's very important.
You should have went first.
Yeah.
you could just-
I'm trying to figure out how should we start our episodes. Like, should we start it with recent events and then get into the discussions, or should we start with the
No, your discussion.
or should we start with the creative discussions and then the real events? But
We'll work on it.
yeah. Like, you know, we'll work on it. Like, I really want y'all feedback on this, because I mean, like I said, I feel like I'm not the only one that think about this, in the sense of, like, you know, we talked about creativepreneurs. So I'm a creator, but I also want to look at this in, like, how many people can I show this to and whatnot? Because as entrepreneurs, our job isn't to sell things to people, I believe, is to solve other people's problems. So if people feel like, representation and diversity, I mean, it's with that that post that you made on Facebook, you said you had white people come and like that post and agree with it.
Yeah, they said, I agree. As a white person, I agree. And I was like, thank you.
As a matter of fact, this is what I wanted to say. I actually am the opposite. I feel obligated to represent everyone else. Now when I say this, not only racially, but religion, sexuality as well. And when I say that, do realize this. Now listen, I'm not going to tell you how to write your story, who you want to include in it. But one thing I will say this, it's like, I'm secular in ideas. Like, I have what I stand by, but I'm secular in ideas, meaning that even if there's a group of people I don't necessarily understand or particularly agree with, I still feel like there's an obligation to represent them anyway. Because I look at it like this. It's like, the fact is, once you open your eyes and you're realistic to things, the fact is, everyone has a story. And the thing is, only once you've opened up and gotten to know different people and researched different things can you really see people for what they are. And the fact is, because the thing about it, I think, and one reason I do represent people outside of my household, and what I mean by that is, like I said, people that I don't necessarily fully understand or agree with. The reason I would choose to represent those people as well is because the fact is, it's like, well, first of all, I'm not trying to write perfect characters, perfectly good, perfectly evil, or whatever. Meaning, I'm not going to always agree with my own darn heroes. And, so why should I shy away from representing people in real life I may not fully have a kinship with?
With that said, and I think this was a movement, anyone that's listening to this that knows this movement, please mention it in the comments, where a lot of writers felt like if you're writing a story, especially one of demarginalized characters, you should also have came from that same background. So exactly what do you mean when you say characters of people that you don't understand? Like, if you don't understand that, then don't you risk the chance of misrepresenting them?
This is what I mean by that. When I say don't understand, I mean obviously you have to learn to understand. What I think. How do I put this? I think
we're holding hands,
and now we're not.
I'm trying to figure out the best way to say this. Like, okay, let's use religion for instance. Okay, let's say you don't like a certain religion, like you don't like Catholicism, which is you don't like that religion.
Catholicism.
Yeah, or Catholicism, right?
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean you dislike Daredevil. Daredevil is Catholic. I love Daredevil. I like seeing him in struggle.
I was like, Nicolas Cage is Catholic?
Nicolas,
what?
You said Daredevil. Oh my goodness. I'm thinking of Ghost Rider.
I was so confused.
Wait, what's his name? Ben
Affleck?
Ben Affleck.
Oh,
okay,
yes.
yeah.
Sorry, I was totally thinking of Ghost Rider, and then it's like you brought up Nicolas Cage.
Yeah,
because he was a black man, and
so I'm trying to figure out why Aaron's talking about bad movies here. I'm talking about Netflix Daredevil.
Oh, okay.
Jesus.
See, I haven't seen Netflix Daredevil.
Yeah, you suck.
It's gone.
But okay, wait,
canceled.
Because we're bringing up so much stuff, and I feel like at one point we're probably gonna have to do a part 2 and like revisit all of this. Because like religion is one thing, but we're talking about race.
Yeah,
we're talking about race, and then like at the same time, race doesn't really define who you are. Just like how people can say that gender doesn't, or the gender that they were born with doesn't define their sexuality. I said that
their
right.
Their mental, I guess you would say. Their sexual mental. It's kind of like
right. It's their sexuality, right? Or is it the other way around? Their sexuality doesn't.
I think you mean their biological. I think what you're trying. I don't know. Their biological gender doesn't necessarily match their mental gender.
Yeah, that's
I think.
Okay.
But we'll see. This is
But
exactly.
I think I'm pretty sure his gender doesn't match the sexuality.
Well, hold on, hush. Because this is exactly to the point I'm getting. Like, see, obviously we don't have like an obvious understanding of
And
exactly
I would
what
love
we're
to
saying.
bring someone on that
But
has that.
this is
but
a reason.
If we was to have a character like that, then I feel like I wouldn't be able to properly represent them.
Yeah.
So
But
this
this
But
is
that doesn't mean do you exclude them?
well, this is the thing. And this is exactly what the main thing is. Like, to wrap it up with what we were talking about, and I want people to understand this because I talked about diversity and representation to a fellow writer, and just to watch him kind of like just take the color pick tool and characters that he had was white, because he mainly had a white cast, and he was a African American writer. He just started changing people these colors for no reason, and not really changing who they are, because like the color of your skin
Doesn't define you.
it doesn't define you, but it does add to how you experience the world.
And that's
experience.
exactly going back to what I was saying earlier about, how much of reality are you putting into your stories in time and place, because obviously there's, if you wrote your average black man in the 1950s, that's going to be very different from your average black man in the 1980s.
I actually have a friend who right in that time period, and I have to sometimes send her links on Google saying like, hey, well, this is what was going on for those characters during this time, so maybe you should. And it's like, I don't want to say that there was purposeful ignorance. I definitely saw a lack of just kind of like looking it up, and they have black characters during that time.
And long story short, just do your research. That's the best thing to do.
Basically what I wanted to say.
And on the Earth timeline, on our timeline, then at least do your research.
Research, people. Do a Google search. Go
Even
to
if
your
it's
local library.
Be inspired by anything.
Print out stuff.
It's
Hold files
awesome.
of stuff. Save things in your phone.
Research is so important,
Look at
so
it
you
again.
don't offend others and whatnot. And even as POC creators, you have to understand that we can still offend others.
Yeah.
Like, there's so much stuff I don't know about African culture. Just because I'm African American doesn't mean I'm an expert at African culture. But I feel compelled to add Africans to my stories. But I can go like before I guess to just add this one thing. I had a coworker who was from Uganda, and I remember she was telling me about their marriage practices, and I didn't know that it's like kind of unlawful, or it's like taboo for the mother to hug the groom, or the husband, or to hug her thank you, her son-in-law, and vice versa, for the daughter to hug her
Father-in-law?
no wait no
Or
for
no,
the
it was
father
To hug
the daughter-in-law, his daughter-in-law, and whatnot. I never knew that. So if I was to write about a character, and I'm like, okay, let's make him from or her from Uganda and whatnot, and I just have them act like African Americans and whatnot, I would have had totally just messed up something, and
it would have been offensive.
yeah, it could have been
It would've
offensive,
been
but
to
ultimately it was a misrepresentation, and it's so important that we don't do that.
And also, research isn't you learning from
One source.
other. Well, that too, but it also isn't learning from other works of fiction either.
Yeah, you
Right?
have to actually get some like
Yeah, like, man,
concrete.
so many things I thought was true about Jurassic Park.
No, I mean even then. And there are works of historical literature or just historian literature that's completely wrong.
Right, and then just
talk to
doing the
people,
research.
too. We have the
Exactly.
internet.
Talk to
Just
people.
open a Facebook
Because
Find
let me
people,
tell you the
ask
perfect
questions.
example. Let me tell you the perfect example. Going back to the let's talk about like years ago. I remember Will and Grace was a very revolutionary show.
Oh yeah,
right.
it was, yeah.
Nowadays, people are looking back on that show and they're not too happy with it. And that's a perfect example
The
of.
stereotypes.
There's a list of things we
There are
can't
some
go
jokes
into,
in
but let's
there.
just say there's a reason you don't take things from other works of fiction. You really do have to, get on the internet, get out and meet people, have a conversation, read, watch, live.
Really help with that experience. Help with that well inside of you.
I just ask more questions.
No one thinks alike. If
you're not the type of person, then you still just want to be like, well, I don't want to talk with people. I don't want to research. Well, okay, just get into science fiction. Just write about aliens. Just have them do whatever they want to, act whatever, blue, orange, morality, or
I mean, also as the last note, YouTube's your best friend. There are people who want to tell their stories and their experiences, and you don't have. All you do is just listen to them.
Yeah. Honestly. Contact them. People love to talk about themselves. That's the biggest thing. I can come to MDC and I'm just like, hey, he can probably have his own freaking channel, just him, just a discussion of just what's on his mind. Because people just love to talk. So give a person a chance to talk and learn from them and whatnot. I feel like in our day and age, we want to talk, we want to do the talking, and that really so much has the listening. But you got to be present. You got to listen to people. As
creators, that's very important. Communication is key. I want to say that's the sum of this.
Yeah, and we normally want to end this off on a good note, and I think we each said our piece. Research, listen, communication.
Yeah.
And with that, we're signing off. Episode 2. Blah. Writer husband Anderson Neff Richardson.
Artist wife Anna Richardson, aka Midnight.
And
MDC.
Yeah.
We're gonna get his name in there too. Just